Greetings. In this presentation, I'm going to walk through how to prepare CAD drawings for presentation. Topics will include creating layers and line weights, assigning line weights to them. I'm going to walk through a detail sheet, which is a library of annotation that I have and I'll share with my students. That will include text sizes, graphic scales, and north arrows. I'm going to walk through creating viewports and scaling them, setting them to a particular scale. The LT scale command, which creates or allows for dash lines, and finally printing PDFs. This is the room that I am going to prepare. The first chore is to create layers, and I am intentionally starting with a blank file. It has no layers. We can see up at the top it comes with the 0 layer and the def points layer. The def points layer is a non-printing layer. I'm going to open up the layer properties, which I have over here, and I have it on auto hide. And now we can see here's the 0 layer. They've both been assigned the white color, and they are just set to the default line weight. Before creating these layers, I want to talk briefly about how layers are used in professional practice. So I just changed my file now to my architecture layer file, and I'm going to open this back up now. So in professional practice, things are done differently than we typically do in school. In professional practice, objects, lines, or any other objects in CAD are grouped according to are grouped with similar objects, essentially. In school, we often simplify it and don't use these layers. Once you get into professional practice, you will become familiar with these, and they're really quite easy. There are a lot, as you can see, and this is only really architecture. But I do want to review them so that you're at least familiar with them, not going into professional practice thinking that we just use layers that are called dark line, medium line, and light line, as we often do. And for school, I think it's perfectly fine. Some things could just wait for professional practice, which is coming soon enough. But I do want to walk you through this so that you're familiar with it. So in general, these are the layer names, and you can see that the typical architecture project has many of them. And that's with this A, the first A, that is the designation for the practice. So this would be for architecture. And then as we scroll down, we could see MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing. They do have more than this. These are just some of the basics that are populated here. PS would be for paper space, for printing, and S is for structural. And then we have our major designation, which is these 4 letters here, and then we have a minor designation, which follows. So this would be architecture annotation. So all of these layers right here are annotation layers. So that includes dimensions, notes, revisions, symbols, and text. Then the next group would be for ceilings. So ceiling grids, heads, hidden lines, notes, patterns, a ridge, the roof, soffit, and structure. The next group is for code. Then demo, doors. So this is where doors would go. This would be for door identifiers. So that would be the numbers that identify doors. The next group is for details. And here we get less into objects. It gets a little more fuzzy at this point when we get into details and elevations. So it's not so much about grouping by object here, but it's actually more about line weights, more similar to what we do in school. So this would be A elevation, near, which would be our darkest lines. Then we have far, and then we have distance, patterns, which would be hatches, an elevation grade line, which is very dark. So this is not grouped by siding or shutters or anything like that, or roof shingles. This is more where the designer has to use their judgment and apply it by line weight, really. Then we go into equipment, then floors. There are quite a few for floors. So we're here for floors. So floor casework. So these could be our kitchen cabinets, base cabinets. That would be here. Would casework above would be our casework or kitchen cabinets or anything that's above the cut line. So that would be a dash line, as we could see right there. And then we have hidden lines, handrails, identifying marks again, different levels, patterns, etc. Then we have furniture, furniture identity, glazing would be our windows. So here, different from the elevations, it's broken out by actual objects. So here we have frame, hidden line, so that's not the object, the identifier, and glazing sills. So the frames and the sills are broken out differently. Then we have quite a few roof layers. These are again going back more like the elevation. So roof lines above, below, hidden lines, outlines, and patterns. Special. Special is kind of a catch-all. Then we go into our sections, again similar to elevations. So cut lines, near, far, distance, pattern. And then we go into wall, of which there are probably the most actually. So the most common would be our full wall. Then we have hidden objects again, partitions, patterns. So a lot of these second designations, you get a sense, are actually repeating. Then down here, area, that's a special one. Typically, as we could see there, not printing. So if we want to know the area of each room, we would draw polylines, close them, and they would just live on this layer, not printing. So that's just so that we could quickly identify the area, the square footage of certain rooms. The identifiers for the areas again. Def points I discussed, that's a non-printing layer. And then we get into some mechanical, electrical, and plumbing group here. Then we have our paper space, so all the annotation and the title blocks that go on in paper space, which would live on those layers. And then we have our structural, so columns, framing, headers, joists, walls, grids, grid identifiers. And so this is what CAD standards, they call it, for the architecture, engineering, and construction industry. This is what you will come to know. I'm going to close this now, and I'm going to jump back to my drawing, and here we go. And now I'm going to open that again, actually, and now I'm going to start creating some layers. I'm going to go with our simple version. So I'm going to go with our dark lines, and I will set colors to them. I typically like red, magenta, and green as I go for dark, medium, and light. So I will assign it a red line. It will be a continuous line, and I will set a line weight. I'm going to just kind of take a guess here, about 0.8. These line weights could vary. They should vary according to the project, the size of the plan. If we have a very small room on a big sheet, we could use darker line weights. If we have a very big floor plan with a lot of line weights, or a lot of lines, and it's going to be set at a very small scale, then this would not be as dark, because then lines would just start blurring into each other if they were that dark. Let's create our medium line weight. I'm going to assign a different color to that. I like magenta for medium, and we'll take that 0.8 down to, let's take it down to 0.5. And so once we get to the end of this video and we print our PDF, then we'll have a sense as to if we like these line weights or not, and we have to, of course, have the option to change them. And then we'll have our light lines. Let's change that to a green, and take that down to 0.25. Okay, and then I like to have a special one just for dash lines. And we could set, maybe we'll set that to a up below. Say OK. And we could leave this as a light line, and we'll change continuous to dash. So dash does not appear there, so we have to load the line. And then we have all of the different lines that are available in CAD. And here are our there's dash dot. And now we have dash 2, dash times 2, and just dash. I'm going to go with normal dash. So we have small dashes and large dashes. I'm just going to go with our normal dash. I'm going to say OK. And we are in the process of changing it, so I will say OK there, and that looks good. Now we have a dashed line there. Okay, I'm going to close that now. And sometimes I actually like to just create those lines on the side for reference. So here's our dark line. Let's just duplicate that line a couple times. Then I have my dash line, which I will actually move down to the bottom. Our medium line and our light line. So sometimes I just use the match properties and come over here and don't have to bother with the layer box then. Okay, so now we've got our layers set, and now we want to apply them to this drawing. So I'm going to approach this. I like to use the layers. I like to turn off layers and try to think about how quickly can I possibly do this. So I'm going to start with probably the light line. I'm going to go to match properties, and I'm going to change everything that I would think would be light. So this is our piece of glass here in the middle, so I'm going to leave that for medium. I'm going to change these interior frames for the windows to be light. Typically when I have numerous lines that are close together here, like this one's going to be medium, I know, and then I want it to meet another medium line. It looks strange, I think, when darker lines terminate with light lines. So this is all going to be medium around here. And then when I have lines that are close, for two reasons, just for variety, I'm going to make this one light, but I also, if this were 3 medium lines in a row, I'd be concerned about it kind of blurring and becoming one big line. So I'm just going to run through. This is all, these are going to be dark, that's going to be medium. This, I'm going to make, that one I shouldn't have done. I'm going to turn that back. I'm going to make these door jambs medium. So I want the walls to be dark, so I don't want that. That needs to be a dark line. And these are actually duplicate lines. Not all of them, obviously. And then I'm just going to join that. So I have a nice continuous dark line, and then I just have this light frame coming around. So I'm just going to do them all quickly this way, and then I'll go back. I'll go back and I'll repair those lines. So this will all be medium and light. Medium. This, I'm going to keep these medium, and then we'll just see how it looks in printing. So sills are going light. This window, let's see, yes, we'll do light sills, and this is all wall. This is another sill actually, so I'm going to make that light as well. Sills, more jams. All right, and then I'm back where I began. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, now let me just go back and repair some of these that sometimes I find it's easier just to go back and repair pieces. I want that all to be. So this is good. That really belongs to the wall. this, oh, I forgot a sill over here. Good. That all looks good. Good. Now back into match properties. Wall, wall, wall. If you take a very systematic approach to this, it could really go quite quickly. Obviously, this is just really a single room with a couple of small rooms attached to it, so it's a small file, but this really shouldn't take that long. Good and good. Okay, so now I've got all the light lines done as far as I could tell. So what I'm going to do next is just come up here and turn them off. So now they're out of the way. Then I'm going to do my dash lines, actually. My next smallest group, and it's not showing up as dash, but I'm gonna return to that topic afterwards. So back into match property. So I want my door swings are not actual objects. This is a dash line as well because this is a walkthrough, and that is the ceiling above. This is as well. These lines are big and ugly, these dashes, but we'll repair those. More door swings. So door swings are not objects. These are just paths, the path of the door. So we make those dash so we know that, and then we just like to show them those so that we would be aware of any conflicts with furniture. So that is the dash lines. These two are the lines above, and the rest are door swings. So now I could turn that layer off and get it out of the way as well. This is a pass-through, and this would be a cabinet. So I'm going to move that to the light line. And it's going to just informing me that I moved it to a layer that was turned off. And that should do it. Oh, this would be a dash line too. That's a soffit above. Okay. Now I will work on the medium lines. So that would be the glazing plus the frames, actually all of this. So now the benefit of turning those layers off as I go should speed this whole process up. So we could easily select our doors. So the more lines these are going to be. So I'm just going to actually move into my medium line now. I don't want to make a mistake, and then I'll jump into match properties. And this, yeah, I'll make that all medium. All our interior lines are going to go medium. And this is the way, the quickest way that I think there is to grab is always to go to the corner and up to the left. I did not draw this. There's a lot of small, tiny lines here that are a little odd to me. So now those interior lines belong to our light. So I'll move those now so that they don't get lost. So all these little lines, that's quite sloppy. But good. Glazing. And then when you have something small, you could always do the right, down from top left to bottom right, and you collect everything that's in there. So that's a sill, so I'll get back to that. Good. Good. I'll have to circle back and see why these are missing. Maybe they're connected to a jam, I guess, that I turned off. So that makes sense. This I will make medium, so that's a pass-through again, so that'll be medium, differentiated from the doors, from the walls next to it, and that's that. So those are the mediums, and we could turn that off. And then let's take a look. So this would be left my, what happened to my dark line, there it is. And let's just review to make sure that everything remaining is dark. And I think it would be. This is not. So dark is really, with very few exceptions, really just reserved for the walls. So these would go to light because they are sills. So for walls, I'm not sure what that's doing there. So for walls, what we want is a continuous closed circuit line, and that's what we have looking at here. Just dark lines look very peculiar to me if they just kind of end kind of out in space. If it runs into a medium line, it just doesn't make sense. So I like to see dark lines as nice continuous closed circuits. This is the end of the drawing, so that's open. These are our jams, and we'll see how it looks when it prints. So typically I would close those, but I'm going to circle back after we print. So this all looks good. And then we could simply match properties and get it all, and then we're done. So then we could turn on these guys, and there's our drawing. And I'll further evaluate it when we circle back to the printing. Actually, that's really the final review. Okay, so that's creating layers and line weights. Good. So now we're going to move over to the detail sheet. So this is my kind of library of annotation pieces. And text size, I guess I'm going to skip actually, because text size really can't be determined until we figure out what scale this is going to be printed at. So I'm going to have to skip this. This is actually out of order. So I'm going to jump into creating and putting this thing, creating a viewport and setting it to a scale, actually. So here's my piece of paper, and let us get a viewport. So rarely a viewport. Let's just type it in. And we'll put in a single one. And this is our printable area, so I'm going to stay inside that dashed line. And there's our viewport. Okay, so now we are in paper space, and then we could click and we go into model space. So paper space, nice thin line, model space, dark line. Okay, and when we're in model space, we could also just double click and get inside there. And then we have to realize that when we're in model space, of course, we have the opportunity to maybe do little repairs, but we also could, if we're kind of careless, we could actually erase things and do some, cause problems. So we have to be careful. I rarely ever do anything in model space besides, that is, I rarely jump through a viewport and do anything in model space except for centering this thing up. So I'm just going to center it up, and then PS is for paper space. I select my viewport. PR is for properties. And we have a standard scale that is custom, meaning that it is no scale. And then I could come here and start to scroll through and get a sense as to what. So 3/16 too big, so 1/8 looks like the winner. So it's an 1/8 inch plan now. Okay, so that is our scale. So I wish it could be a little bit bigger, but it is what it is. So now what I will do, actually, I will jump into model space, and now I cannot scroll. If I scroll, I will mess up that scale. And then I'm just going to draw a rectangle, REC. I'm going to come all the way up to this very top left corner, to that bottom right. PS for paper space. Back to the model, and now I could see the size of my paper. I will select that, and I will move it to def points for not printing. Okay, I'll just erase these guys at that point. And so eighth is the answer to the question. Okay, so now that is creating the viewport and scaling it. Okay, so now I will get into the details sheet. And where's my details sheet? Here it is. So again, this is my, there we go, I'm going to close that. This is my detail sheet, and it is my collection of annotation. So as scales get bigger, the objects need to be bigger. I'm sorry, scales actually get smaller. Scales get smaller, the objects need to get bigger. And when it comes, again, well, professional practice, but also any quality presentation, all of the text should be the same size when it reaches paper space. So definitely in professional practice, when we start getting a lot of drawings on large sheets, we're just doing an 11 by 17 sheet. But when you get into large full-scale sheets, you often have numerous viewports at numerous scales, and you want all of the text to be at the same scale when it finally gets printed. So if you have an 1/8 inch viewport next to a 3/16 viewport, you need different text. And as the scales increase and we get to 1.5 inches equals a foot, the text gets smaller and smaller. But when it all gets up to paper space and gets printed, it will all be correct. It'll all be correct. So 1/8 inch, so this is my annotation for it. So I could just pick it up. These are not construction documents, so I'm not going to use really much of this at all, but I could bring it by, and this typically when I create construction documents, that's what I do. I just bring all this kind of gear with me so that I have it. So now I'll keep it intact, so I'll just copy and bring my drawing title here. Scale is set. I will turn detail into floor plan. Okay, you will need so we have medium-sized text and we have large-sized text. So for our title block, which is not just going to be a very kind of casual title block, I'm going to put it down here at the bottom right. I will put my name. And then we could put our class. We could put the project name. So this is the name of this room is the cube. We could put our class name, the term, and that should suffice. Okay. I might, being that this is on the right side, I might justify it to the right actually. Tuck that in the corner there. Okay, that looks pretty good. Maybe I'll lift up my floor plan a little bit now that the text is in. Maybe I'll tuck this into the corner, kind of symmetrical there. So that looks pretty good. Then we have our north arrows. That's that guy. You could design your own, of course. I'll put this guy up here. I'm going to rotate him 90 degrees, and I am going to put some small text in here to explain that this, most people would know that's a north arrow, but I'm going to write Project North. Project North. So Project North means that it is not true north. So if it were true north, meaning where the sun, the sun rises and sets relative to north, that would be true north. Project North is just a reference. So this would be our north wall. This would be our south wall. So typically for Project North, it's just facing up on the page. Typically, there could be exceptions to that. Inside this room for this project, I don't really care where the sun rises and sets, so I'm not going to do true north. But you could do both. You could just pick this up and bring it right over here and do true north. And I don't know offhand where true north is, but it might look something like that, for instance. So true north is one thing and project north is another. Okay? If you have a and the reason I say I don't care about the true north for this is just because it's part of a building. If you were doing a standalone building, then you would definitely expect to see true north. But if we're just doing a fraction of a building, zooming in on one room, perhaps for a remodel here, true north typically is not as relevant. And then graphic scales we also need, which is here. We always want to have that. And I will, I'll put that up here actually with the arrow. And let's just kind of center that up like that. And the purpose, this is at 1/8 inch scale. It will be printed to 1/8 inch, but you always have to be aware that your file, you might send this PDF to somebody, and if you print it at 11 by 17, yes, it is 1/8 inch. But if you printed this on 8.5 by 11 piece of letter size paper, then it would no longer be at 1/8 inch because it was printed on the wrong size sheet. So that's one reason why architects, designers typically will say, do not scale drawings. The scale might not be correct because we can't control how it gets printed. If it gets printed at the incorrect size or incorrectly for some reason, then it's no longer at a scale. And then this graphic scale, then we could just kind of glance over at this door and see if this is 4 feet, then yes, that's probably a 3-foot door. So it kind of gives us a sense. If this is 16 feet, then this wall over here, probably 20, 24, 28 feet or something like that, I might guess. Maybe more, maybe 32 feet or something. But the graphic scale helps in that regard. Okay? So now we have annotated. We've provided our annotation for this drawing. Okay, so detail sheet text sizes we took care of. And just to go back, typically for every scale, for every drawing, there are 2 different text sizes. So this is our large text size, and this would be our small. So title block information might be large, drawing names might be large. But then if we get into the room, perhaps, or we start annotating things inside, then that could be a smaller text size. So this is kind of high priority stuff here. So I'm going to leave that at the large text size. Okay, LT scale and dashed lines. Very important and a little tricky. Okay. All right, I just inserted this. So this is kind of the cheat sheet for LT scale. So what the LT scale command allows to happen is to display dashed lines. And the property box also plays a part in this, so I'll open that up. Okay, so we see these big dashed lines, and they don't look too good. But let's jump over to the sheet now. So now we don't see dashed lines. So they're dashed in model space, but they're not dashed here. So why is that? So let's jump back. And the one important thing that I did not include here, I don't think I could, brought up my Word document. So I'm going to just add it now. For printing, it equals 1. Okay, so let's just reinsert that actually. So I have it right here. And there we go. Okay. So if we are printing if we're printing in paper space in particular, or to be more specific, that is, LT scale should be set to 1. So let's just see what that does. So LT scale, it's set at 96 right now. If I set it to 1, now I could see in paper space what I saw in model space. Okay? And let's jump back to model space. Now it's disappeared from here. So what I'm getting at is you could only have dashed lines correct in one place or the other. And here in paper space, the viewport, which is set to 1/8 of an inch scale, is telling, or is kind of not telling, it's dictating how these dashed lines appear. It's geared in. It's within the viewport. The viewport is what's calling the shots here. An 1/8 inch viewport. This is what the dashed lines look like. When we're in model space, however, CAD does not know how to display these dashed lines. So you have to tell it. You have to say, show me what this would look like if it were printed at 1/8 inch scale. And so when we plug in 96, we see what we saw in the 1/8 inch viewport. If we plugged in here 48, which represents 1/4 inch, for instance, now these dashed lines look better, but that's not how it's going to print. That's not how it's going to print in an 1/8 inch viewport, so that is misleading. We've set the LT scale incorrectly. And if the LT scale is set incorrectly, then you cannot truly assess how your dashed lines are going to look. So we know that we have an 1/8 inch. We know that our final product is 1/8 inch, so this needs to be set at 96. And now we don't like these dashed lines because they're too big and kind of goofy looking, so we'll repair them. That's not a problem. And so whatever you're printing at, there's always a specific LT scale that has to be set. So I just typed in the 4 big ones here. But so if we had 3/4 inch, 3/4 inch would fit right in here, more than a half but less than 1. It would come in at 36. It would come in at 18. 18, right? Halfway between these two, right? 3/4 inch is halfway between these two. Therefore, 18 is halfway between these two. All right? If we had 3/8 of an inch right here, halfway between these two scales, then we'd want to come in halfway between these, and halfway between 24 and 48 is 36. So 3/8 of an inch, the LT scale should be 36. Okay? And that's how we could properly view what our dash lines will look like when they print. So now how do we repair these things? We come to our property box. So that's the LT scale, but we also have independent line type scales, and they're by default set to 1. So this just takes a little practice, or a little experimentation, not really practice. You just have to change the numbers. And that already looks a lot better. So, and now this one, so now let's just go through and match properties and change all our dash lines and see how we like them. We don't have to change them all because we know we don't like them. So for this long line, this looks decent. These look decent, but the dashes still look a little big. For this short line, it does not look good at all because that barely looks like a dash line. These two will probably remain the same. I'm going to go from 0.5 to 0.3, and now I think I like what we have here. Okay, so that looks like, or maybe 0.4. Let's just take a look. Looks good. That looks good. A good amount of it's kind of all done by eye, but a proper amount of dashes for that stretch, I would say. I don't think it's going to work here, but let's just take a look. So no. So that remains at this scale. It remains at 0.4. It just remains as 2 dashes in 1 space. Not going to do it. So let's just go right to 0.1. Maybe that's a little too many dashes. 0.2. That looks good to me. Those dashes, that looks good. So now let's just match properties and see how we like that on the door. This little tiny door is going to probably not work. That door looks decent. 4 dashes. Or we come over and see what 0.1 looks like. So we went from 4 dashes to about 10 or so. So I think we're going to go back to 0.2. That looks good. And this is at 0.2. Let's see what that looks like at 0.1. Better. I think that looks good. And then I will match properties and quickly get the rest of the doors. that is all of our dashed lines. So I think that looks pretty good, pretty good. And so let's recall that we had 4 dashes right there, and we had 4 dashes on that door as well. So now when we jump back to paper space, we have all solid lines. Let us adjust our LT scale back to 1, and lo and behold, 4 dashes there and 4 dashes there. So I think that is about all that we need to do besides make a PDF out of this thing. We covered layers and line weights. We covered everything from the detail sheet. We created our viewport. We got some good dashed lines, and now we're ready to make a PDF and conclude this. So Control P brings up our plot dialog box. We are going to create a PDF. So if you are having Adobe problems which occur in life, if you don't have Adobe, or it's not up to date, then sometimes this causes problems. So I usually just come right down to AutoCAD PDF and I go with high quality print. Okay, 11 by 17 looks good. Our little viewport there looks good. Extents is good. If we print from model space, we do it with a window, but in paper space, I just do extents, so it's just going to print everything that's in paper space. I've seen people in professional practice actually have things off on the side in paper space. I never do that. Extents would not work then because it would print everything that's hanging out in paper space. I keep paper space nice and clean. The only thing that's in paper space besides this viewport would be a title block out here. But for this simple drawing that's not a construction document, I just do a simple little title block inside there. Monochrome is what we want. Just to mention, if we go back to those architectural layers, what people typically will do will have a pen style, a specific plot table, basically, for printing all of those different architectural layers. For us, for when we set our line weights in the layer, actually, I just go with monochrome, and that seems to work nicely. Landscape, fit to paper, no, it should be 1:1, that's good. Center the plot. So I think everything looks good here. So let's just go with preview. And so we have our, that looks decent, and now let's just zoom in. So our door jambs kind of, at this scale, kind of got disappeared, but they kind of just blur nicely, at least into our walls. That looks like a nice continuous solid line. All of our interior walls do look a little lighter, you know, the kind of the guts inside of the wall. So our darkest line, as I said, is for our walls, and what that should nicely do is just define the habitable area right there. These also got really dark. These kind of turned into one line. If you actually printed that as a piece of paper and didn't zoom in, that would just be one line. So I might go back and change that. I'll print the PDF and see. These lines also very close to each other. They got blurred and became one big kind of blobby line. So I might repair that as well. I'm going to make the PDF and see. The glazing looks a little heavy. I'm just going to print this thing and just make sure that my PDF looks like what I expect it to look like. So let's zoom in here. So now we are at 100%, but we'll zoom in. Yes, so I would say doors are too dark. I would say these walls that are tight together are too dark. So we could change the layer for these. I would move these to a medium layer. I might move these. Oh, actually, yeah, these definitely have to move. These are on the dark wall layer, so those are going to move off to the medium. But then the medium layer, looking at this glazing, maybe that's just a little too. Maybe we could actually just change the same here. So this is too close. So I think the medium layer is just too dark. So I'm gonna change that in the layer box. Yeah, I think all the glazing looks a little too dark. So let's shrink that down. And all we have to do is come up to our layer properties, and so interestingly, a lot of, so I brought things in from the detail sheet, so that's why all these other layers arrived actually. So I'm going to actually turn down the dark a little bit too. I'm going to turn that down to 0.7. Our medium was definitely too dark. I'm going to cut that, make it half, keep it at half of the dark one. So that's, I'm going to bring that down to 0.3. And I'm going to actually make light a little lighter too. This tight floor plan at 1/8 inch on a small piece of paper is one reason why these walls are getting a little, or these lines are kind of bleeding into each other. So one more time, back to plotting. Now that I've done it once, I could just come up here to previous plot and it all populates. Let's make a plot, send it to the desktop. We'll make this number 2. And it's looking better already from a distance. Yeah, the doors look much better. I think the glazing looks better, but this is still a little problematic there. That might want to go to the light layer actually. Maybe all these interior pieces really want to go to the light layer. But I think other than that, I kind of like what I see. See, I think this all looks good, nice and dark. These look nice here, but in the other areas, it's just they're just too tight. The lines are too close to each other. I think this all looks good, though. That all looks nice to me. And this looks good. It's really just this one is bothering me, and this one. That's about it. Otherwise, I am happy with it. So let's do it one more time, quickly. So that is jumping into model space, and that's this. Oh, so I missed it. No wonder. So it didn't even make it to our. It remained on the dark. So it should have been medium. All right. Well, that explains that problem. And the other one was here. So my mistake again. All right. So it wasn't a layer problem. It was operator error. I got them in the wrong place. So I think this should do it. So let's just one more time. Control P, previous plot, preview, plot, and we'll make this number 3. Save, and looks much better. That looks better, and this guy looks better as well. So we'll just zoom in. I'm not going to zoom in too much. I want to see the whole thing at once. And when I glance at it, I want to see nice and dark, continuous lines for the walls. And then after that, I could easily identify where the windows are because they're nice and light. And then the dashed lines look good. So this is a decent looking drawing, I would say. Okay, so that is the task at hand. All right, good luck and thank you.